Hello, I am Jake Guthrie presenting my musical links investigation for Ivy Music SL. Today we'll be discussing the links between South African Mbube choir music and traditional Western carol music. The specific strong links I will be analyzing are the use of strophic form in both cultures and the parallels and harmonic structure between the two. Throughout this lecture, I will gently touch on the backgrounds to these musical cultures, move into detail on the strong links mentioned previously, discuss the weaker links connecting them, and finally describe how they are, in fact, different. I hope you enjoy. The first step that must be undertaken is a skim over the background information of the two musical cultures. Mbube choir is a relatively new musical culture, developing from Zulu work songs in South Africa in the early 20th century. The style is titled after South African artist Solomon Linda's first song Mbube, which is Zulu for lion. This particular song will be our basis for analysis throughout the presentation. Mbube musical culture features an all-male a cappella group with a heavy emphasis on voices in the lower registers in order to create the distinctively gravelly and full timbre of Mbube music. As of today, the most well-known group of the genre is Ladysmith Black Mambazo. Carols need little to no introduction for most of us who celebrate Christmas. They begin, like most Christian traditions, as a pagan ritual. The ritual of singing and dancing during the winter solstice was adapted by the Church and became popular for a short while. They were re-established during the 12th century under St. Francis, developing the chord structures used in modern carols. However, these revitalized carols faded out of existence until the 18th century, when the chord progressions were refreshed and given new liturgies. Our listening for this musical culture will be Silent Night, as performed by the Winchester Cathedral Choir. Now we get to the good stuff. After first defining our musical cultures, the next step is to provide a preliminary analysis of each culture. These will be broad sweeping general statements about these styles in order to build a starting point for the in-depth analysis in terms of strong musical links. Mbube has an interesting blend of 19th and 20th century American and European sounds with traditional African stylistic tools. From Zulu roots, the culture developed a cyclical call-and-response structure with overlapping phrases, giving it a generally strophic form. It uses pentatonic scales in the melody as well. From Western musical culture, it took the four-part vocal structure. This gives it a homophonic texture similar to a Western style, but using a different modal structure rooted in traditional African music. Finally, South African music differs from other regional musical dialects by an emphasis on voice as opposed to wind or especially percussion instruments. Carols are a well-known musical culture in the Western world. Their fervent use in Christian groups for religious ceremonies and holidays makes the relatively simple tune familiar. They are built into a four-part orchestration for voice, generally singing a tall chord in near monorhythm. The intense use of homophony and harmony truly is what characterizes this type of music, as they help retain the medieval sound with which most carols are written. Most carols are written in sections of verses and refrain, lending it towards an almost strophic form with slight variations with each repetition. Given these rudimentary analyses of our two main musical cultures, we can now dive into how these two types of music from different parts of the world are ultimately linked together, obviously, outside of Mean Girls, that is. The first strong link that we will discuss is that of the presence of strophic form in both of our examples. Within the first minute and a half of listening to the recording of Mbube, located on track 1, the pattern that continues throughout the song is simple to pick up on. The falsetto melody comes in and repeats once. The second melody, still in the soprano part, then comes in at 38 seconds into the listening, and then repeats once. After these two, at 55 seconds, it begins the whole circuit again by returning to the falsetto. Throughout the entirety of the song, it can be found that it is repeated again and again for a total of 4 times, with a variation in the falsetto for the last repetition. A similar experience lies in store when listening to Silent Night. The listening on track 2, which is slightly over the first minute. The distinction between sections is relatively clear. The choir comes to a caesura and then begins with the same melodies within the first section. The second repetition undergoes slight variation on the original theme, but still retains the same overall musical ideas. The third section follows similarly to the second, with the same musical theme present with slight variations in the chord progression and use of harmony. What truly draws these two cultures together through strophic form is not necessarily solely the use of it, but also the function that it serves. By repeating the same sections, both musical cultures are heralding to their original purposes of music, for group connections. Work songs, such as the original intention for Mbube music, were used to create empathy and relationships between people. Carols were originally created for celebrations and festivities. Though the former was also used to lament against apartheid, both of these different cultures served the basic function of joining the lives of individuals within a society through times of strife or of celebration. Strophic form is used to create a call and response pattern, as it would ultimately make it easier to partake in music. The group repeating the same line or verse back to an original singer helps make singing a communal and listening skill, and less one of the privilege of needing to memorize songs word for word, which is an incredible way to outreach towards a community that is not necessarily universally educated, such as most rural South African villages under apartheid and medieval communities. The utilization of strophic form to create a call and response pattern ultimately bridges these two cultures, showing an incredibly strong link between the two. The use of community songs, ones that were based around repetition in the group as a whole, would be easier to learn and bring people together, which was the original purpose behind the inception of each of these genres. The next strong link to be analyzed is the harmonic structure of each of these musical cultures. Mbube music is entirely based around the choir setting. The all-male a cappella ensembles rely heavily on homophonic textures and strong harmonies in order to generate the tonal sound that appeals to so many students of Western music. The tall, bass-heavy chords have a rich and full texture, and a straightforward soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, or SATB, harmonic structure. This can be heard in track 3, with a pulsating low voice providing the harmonic background for the melody and soprano. Carols have a similar structure with a similar sound. After the revival of the medieval genre in the 18th century, the chords were adjusted to fit conventional notation and tonal practices. This gives them a bottom-up SATB setup, an incredible homophonic texture that is full and pure sounding. The fourth track goes to the third and final section of the recording, which emphasizes the bass supported melody as it gets increasingly high-pitched. Though the harmonic progression for the two differ greatly due to the absence of cadences in Mbube, the structure of the chords is relatively similar. What differs between the two in terms of their harmonic structure is the mode in which they function. Carols, as traditional Western pieces in music, use an octave tonal structure, whereas Mbube stylings use pentatonic structures. Despite this discrepancy, the two cultures will stack up the same, pun intended. In order to investigate this to the fullest, we should probably start from the bottom. When building chords, both cultures build a strong bottom part, the equivalent of a strong bass, pun also intended, in the sound pyramid. From heavy bass accompaniment, they build onto tenor accompaniment, which is less strong but still an important building block in the chord. Next are the alto voices, which usually function either as a part of the chord or as a counter melody, still supporting the harmonies of the other voices. Finally, the use of soprano melody in both cultures provides the capstone to the pyramid, leading the chordal changes and progressions from the stop with an accompaniment from the harmonic parts. The incredibly strong use of bass and tenor accompaniment to follow the melody is an important factor in bridging these two cultures. These two parts, in both, function as a way to support the soprano and effectively end up moving little without the soprano parts heading the changes. Ultimately, the bass part develops minimally to not at all, the tenor part usually functioning more independently, but still only in direct support of the parts in the upper registers. Examining and directly comparing these two pieces, they readily show the strong links they share in terms of harmonic structures. Each of the voices contributes to an overall chordal structure, with the soprano leading in the melody and intense support coming from the parts in the lower register. Despite the use in Mbube of pentatonic chordal structures, the function of the harmony between the two cultures and listenings remain the same. There are several minor links that these two songs feature as well, primarily that both are in duple meter. Also, both share the same medium of an all-male voice group that performs a cappella. Finally, both have minimal dynamic contrast, except in terms of the natural arcing contrast. Unfortunately, no two cultures so different can match up in their entirety. Mbube and Silent Night differ in a few key ways. Primarily, they differ in terms of the melody. Mbube uses a descending disjunct melodic motion in the falsetto. Also, because of the grown and matured performer singing the melody, the pitch is a bit lower than that of Silent Night, which uses an upward arching conjunct melody from prepubescent boys in order to hit the shockingly high pitches. They also differ in terms of their tonality. As was mentioned during the analyses of their harmonic structures, Mbube functions in a pentatonic scale. Silent Night, on the other hand, is in a traditional Western-style octave scale. Thus, their structure of chords in terms of components differ as well as the chord progressions. Ultimately, the investigation of these two songs and musical cultures has left me, at least, shocked with how similar they are. Throughout our examination, we found that they share many things. The strongest aspects of these two songs linking them together are the stroking form they're both used and why it is used, as well as the structuring of the harmonies and texture. They were also connected in terms of their utilization of dynamics and meter. However, we did discover that they do differ in terms of their tonality and melodic function. I really enjoyed going through this investigation, and thank you so much for participating as well.